Right, in this video, I'm going to cover how to use the blending method on a cube. I went ahead and imagined that there was a light source here and that we have our cast shadow here, and I've gone ahead and planned that out. I'm going to erase the outlines of that so that I can just see it very lightly, like the rest of my figure. I'm going to go ahead and start with the lightest first, and I'm going to go ahead and add using my paper to block off that edge so I don't have to erase it and keeps it nice and straight. I'm going to very, very featherlight shade this area. And what I'm doing with my hands is I'm holding my pencil almost parallel with the table so that I don't push too hard into the paper. I'm going to move back and forth with this ever so lightly. Now, just if you watch my pyramid video, I mentioned that at the apex here, it gets lighter along this line. So I want you to pay close attention to that. I'm going to shade from this corner, this side first, so that it's a little bit darker and I can ease off on the pressure a little bit easier for this cube. I'm going to move my paper and continue to shade. What I'm doing is just feather light. I'm applying pressure on the outside of the paper and letting it take the brunt of the force. That way I can have more of a light touch with this. I'm going to use my little blending cloth here to blend this square. I'm going to accidentally, not, well, on purpose accidentally, shade in this area so I can use my kneaded eraser, just so I can use that as an example and show you guys. Okay, nice and smooth. Let's pretend, oh man, I meant to leave this area white here. Let's go ahead and make sure our kneaded eraser is clean by kind of pulling at it like silly putty. I love these because I can erase things very lightly. And well, let's be honest, they're fun to play with. A little bit like silly putty. Okay. One thing I like to do with my kneaded eraser is you can ball it up, you can make it into the shape you want. I'm going to make mine flat. I'm going to kind of put it on my thumb, like a gross piece of gum. And I'm going to just kind of press into the page. What's really cool about this eraser is that it doesn't completely erase everything. It just lightens it up a little bit. So I can maintain that blended look a little bit better. I am going to hard erase this edge because like I wanted it to be white, but I also want it to be a gradient moving out. So I'm just going to remove just the tiniest bit of graphite there. Next, we have the top of the cube, which is going to be the medium surface. This is the light surface, medium, and darkest surface. So with this one, again, very lightly, I'm going to shade, but with a little bit more pressure than last time. Just going to follow the shape of the surface that I'm shading. Again, I'm letting the paper on the outside of this take most of the force of my pencil so that I can ease off on the pressure as I go. When you're blending, you don't want to leave too many white spaces. You want to do most of the legwork with your pencil. Okay, I'm coloring as light as I can for now. If I want to add more later, I can. Okay. I'm going to cross-hatch this a little bit to fill in those areas. And by all means, if it makes it easier on you, rotate your page. I find it much easier to work at multiple angles. But that's how I work. Everyone works a little bit differently. That's just my method that I share with you in case it works for you. One thing great about art is there's usually different ways to tackle things. Okay, got a nice solid area there. I'm going to go ahead and blend it. I'm going to use my paper to block out this area so I get those nice clean lines. I'm not going to go over this area yet. I don't have my paper. See, whoops, that's okay. That's going to be my darkest square. I can get a little bit of smudging on that side. And I'm going to. Okay. Pretty happy with that one. I noticed in my example that I'm looking at, my photograph, I have a hard white line here, so I'm going to erase just a bit of this shading. I don't necessarily like the shape that I got from this. I'm going to use my blending stick to kind of move some of this shading back over. If you find that you have too much graphite on your blending stick to start off with, you can, use a scrap piece of paper and kind of like rub that off. See how there's a lot on here already? You can kind of clean that off. See how it's starting to come out lighter? You can clean some of that off with a clear piece of paper. Okay, last but not least, we have the darkest square. Just like before, I'm going to kind of block that area off. It's kind of like when you're painting a house and you don't want to get paint on the ceiling or on the trim. For blending method, I really like to make sure, that my pencil is dull. That way I don't have any standout lines from shading. And honestly, because I want this to look like a white square, for this darkest area, I'm only using like a medium pressure. I'm gonna fix my mistake here. Shade this bottom part. And actually, instead of blocking this off, I'm going to outline the bottom of my rectangle where the shade is supposed to be. One thing that I didn't mention, I have a pile of papers underneath the paper I'm working on so that it has a little bit of cushion. I like to do this so that my pencil doesn't really press into the paper very hard. Outline this part. If you need to, totally use a ruler for straight lines. I highly encourage it, especially if you're not used to using a ruler and you kind of stink at it. It takes practice to kind of get good at those things. Again, I'm letting my scrap paper take most of the pressure here. Kind of make sure everything's even with my pencil. Okay. And on this edge, I want to make sure I'm darker than the rest. The reason I want this part to be darker and lighter down here is because of reflected light. Reflected light is when light bounces off the surface that something is sitting on onto the object, and that light is just kind of reflecting back up. So I'm going to define this edge just a little bit more. On that. Now, blending sticks are great. I don't like them for flat areas or large areas, but I really like them for small areas like this corner. And I'm going to move in a circle so that I don't get streaks. Erase that mistake there. and blend with my blending cloth. With my blending cloth too, I'm moving in a circle so that it fills in any gaps. All right, last but not least, we're going to go ahead and add that cast shadow, or drop shadow if you prefer that terminology. Remember, if it's close to the object, it's going to be darker. Away from the object, it's going to lighten up a little bit. So I'm going to go in with some decently hard pressure. And I'm going to lighten up. Again, you want your pencil to do most of the blending work, and then you're going to go in with those tools and make sure it looks nice and smooth. All right. A little bit in the corner. All right, there's your blended cube.